True Detective Night Country episode 5 is over, but here on post show recaps, we're just getting started. We're here on a Friday because of the Super Bowl, and True Detective has aired early on HBO Max. So I'm here, and of course, I'm not alone. I'm here with Dr. Amanda. Amanda, how you doing?
I'm great. We're here on a special Friday. We get our True Detective early.
Yeah.
So I was really excited about that because I really wanted to watch the next episode and move along. So we're advancing in the mystery. The moral of the story today, Grace, is all cops are bad.
That's pretty true. That's probably true. Yeah, even the ones who are good are covering up
They're doing
stuff.
really
They're doing
bad
bad
stuff.
stuff.
They're doing
Yeah,
bad
it's
stuff.
true.
Yikes.
That's true. We got our screener of True Detective. Did you also get your screener for the Super Bowl? Because we all know that that's planned and fake. Did you get that? Did you?
Yes, I just can't
Yeah.
figure out if it was like there was foul play or if it was just a supernatural cause.
I can't believe Taylor did, go out on the field and interrupted the Super Bowl halftime show. That's strange. Anyway, well, we're here on Friday. Super Bowl is on Sunday. Early release, so fun, so fun. I was very excited to get the episode early, so we're gonna chat about it. Make sure you subscribe. postrecaps.com/True Detective. I think Jess and I will be back at our normal time. We're gonna give people lots of time as it's the penultimate episode before the finale. So we will be recording probably around Tuesday evenings. You have tons of time this week to get in your feedback. Not exactly sure when LT and Mike will be getting together, but I'm sure they will let you know. But if you're subscribed, it'll just drop in your feed and you don't have to
Wow,
worry
that's
about it.
definitely the way to go. You got to subscribe.
That's right.
So and this
Yeah,
is your last chance to make your predictions and
it's true.
sound smart. So definitely listen to all the pods, send us your feedback. And also super exciting, Grace, when we come back for the finale, we will be live.
That's right.
So we can take people's feedback live. I'm
Yeah.
very excited. Everybody, please, like it's more fun the more people join us.
Yes.
So this has been a great ride. I would love to have as many people watching us live and interacting, and we can respond to your comments live in the pod.
Yeah, so we'll be on youtube.com/post show recaps. We'll make sure that the link is available ahead of time so you can click that little reminder button to join us. We will post it on X and we'll share it around and come and join us live. Yeah, we'll read your comments as we're recording it live. So come check that out again, youtube.com/post show recaps. That'll be about 10 Eastern, depending on how long the episode is. If it's a 10:15, typically we give about 15 minutes. If the episode is a super long one, which I haven't checked the runtime on yet, then maybe we'll be a bit later than that, but we shall see. Give us some time to at least give 15 minutes to think about it.
I need to get a drink of water. I need to make sure I look presentable. I need to make sure there's no bats in my third floor, which is what happened last time we were live, Grace.
Is that true? You never told. I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's why I was in my kitchen.
Oh,
and my
yeah,
husband
that's
was
right.
walking around in the background because there was a bat that was in my office.
That was the What We Do in the Shadows crossover where you bat. Yeah. All right. Well, let's chat about episode 5. It's a big one. A lot happens. What do you think of this one? The penultimate episode, Amanda.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that this was, I think a lot of times with these kinds of shows with this structure, you expect a lot to happen in the penultimate episode. This was definitely action packed. There were a couple of things that happened in this episode that I thought were like a little bit clunky from a plot standpoint, but I thought that the characters were all really effective. I'm very, very like the mystery. I'm very eager to resolve this mystery because I feel like if anything, the way the show has paced, I feel like less certain about what is still in play at the end of episode 5, which is kind of exciting. So I'm very eager to see how this all resolves. I can't wait to talk to you about our final theories. This is my last chance to say anything that could possibly be a smart prediction about the show. So
no, you could say it afterwards. You would have said it afterwards, and then I guess it's not a prediction.
It's not a prediction then. So this is my last chance to get any sort of credit for being right. So I'm eager to talk about that. But really, like a very, very emotional, really beautifully done episode again. And through the 5 of the 6 hours of this show, I'm very, very pleased with everything that it's had to offer.
Yeah, I agree. I think these last 2 episodes in particular have, for me, felt the most like there's a world in which we maybe need more time.
Mhm.
I think especially last week, I was as I do the deep dive and I'm looking through all these comments, and it's like, that's pretty amazing that the Coast Guard like found Julia before the lighthouse knew that she was gone. And we're
Mhm.
also able to identify her body, even though she was like fallen in the water. Like it's
Mhm.
like, and so like it's like true, and I'm giving them a little bit like, yeah, it's TV, so it's fine. Like it feels a little messy around the edges. I think this episode too,
Mhm.
like I screamed, is there a little bit of a time jump? Did they give us a timestamp
Yeah,
on the
so they
episode?
go from Christmas Eve to New Year's Eve
Okay. So
between episodes.
yeah, okay. So at least a little bit of a time jump that this week. Which I think is interesting because they've mostly been like almost consecutive days, I think, so far
Mhm.
since we've been in like the night. So that is interesting. But I think that this was another, and I would agree that I feel like going into the finale, I'm really not sure. I have
Yeah.
my theory that I've said on the deep dive that I feel pretty, I don't even think I'm fully confident in it. So I think that that's like
Mhm.
fair of the show. I do think like in a 6 episode season, that's totally fine. That it does feel like I do feel like I'm going into last episode really not knowing
Yeah.
what we're going to get. I think the ending of this episode was also fairly unexpected in terms of
Mhm.
what we saw, but it was a very like, yeah, again, it was like an actiony episode rather than I felt like we got a ton of information, which I think again in a 6 episode season is totally fine
Yeah.
for a mystery show. But
Yeah. So I'll tell you, like, I leave episode 5 feeling like more certain and more like solidified in understanding some of the themes of the show. And I
right.
can't wait to talk about like how I think that the spirituality and the murders and what's going on, like how all of this thematically ties in, because I feel like that has really coalesced very nicely. But in terms of the specific mystery of how exactly did the Solal scientists die, I'm at a complete loss, because I think that right now
Mhm.
we know who are the bad guys. We know that Kate McKintrick is a bad guy. We know that Hank was bad, but not involved directly in the murder.
Right.
I'm sort of out on Raymond Clark being the person who is the perpetrator of the Salal murder or the Annie K murder.
Mm.
Um, so there's very few people left in this very, very small universe that seem to be plausible killers. So I'm really interested in kind of talking all of this through with you and how exactly we arise on the terrified corpsicle of it
Mhm.
all. If it's not actually a freak weather event, it's still the
Oh yeah, I forgot
mechanics.
we solved it this week. I forgot that. We actually did solve it. I forgot. It's a freak weather event.
It's a
Which is
weather event.
actually what they said about the I'm forgetting the name, but the Russian men who went through,
Yeah.
they just said it was a
Mhm.
freak weather event, an avalanche in
Well,
particular.
there
So
you go.
yeah.
It's a there was that one point where, like, they explain, like, "Well, yeah, like, it could cause, like, damage to the eardrums and psychosis," and I'm like, "Oh, well, you know what? They make a pretty
Yeah, great point.
valid
Yeah.
case."
Yeah.
So I think I know the why, and I think I know broadly the who, but the actual mechanics of what happened to the men at Salal is no clearer. So I'm really, really excited for us to finally get some answers there.
Okay, well, let me give a quick recap of the episode. Basically, Danvers and Navarro are going to go and try enter the caves. They are shut down. They cannot get through the entrance. It looks like it's been blown up. Connolly brings Danvers to see Kate, where he reveals that the case is closed. It was just a freak weather accident. She doesn't buy it because the NGO actually funds that funds the mine. The mine funds the research station, which
Mhm.
gives out basically bogus pollution numbers to protect the mine. Connolly hints that he knows what happened at the Wheeler house in an attempt to get Danvers to stop, which does seem to kind of work until she is further compelled by Navarro. Hank seems to have figured out about the Wheeler incident by logging onto Pete's computer and sharing it with Kate and/or Connolly. And then Kate tasks Hank with making Otis go away so that the Annie death will remain unsolved. He says he's not a murderer, that he covered up Annie's death so he could be made chief of police. So we learned this. We thought maybe he was chief of police. He is,
Mhm.
in fact, not, and thought he would be given it, but Danvers arriving changed things. Meanwhile, Navarro goes to put Annie's ashes
Julia's ashes.
sorry, Julia in the sea, and experiences a trance-like thing of walking into the sea, much like Annie and potentially her mother was. I say Annie, Julia did,
Mhm.
and Rose ultimately like has to like call her back and bring her back. Hank follows Danvers home. She has given Otis heroin so that he'll show her how to enter the caves through the ice, which we learn is a trick from Eddie. And that's the night country. They would go into
Mhm.
the night country as kids by breaking through the ice and going down underneath. Hank shoots Otis, and Pete, who is now staying in the shack because he learned that Hank betrayed him, shoots his dad when Hank goes to aim his gun at Liz. Pete stays behind to clean up the crime scene and make it look like an accident. He'll drive Hank's truck out and think he was getting rid of Otis, while Danvers and Navarro head to the caves, aka the Night Country. They will also be in the Night Country, Amanda.
They're
Um,
all in the night
they're all in the Night
country.
Country. Where do you want to start?
Wow.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I want to talk a little bit about the whole supernatural element of the show, because I have a
Yes.
theory, Grace. And last week you asked me if I would be disappointed if we don't get like a full resolution
I'm
on
asking
whether.
everybody this question.
I know so I
The
won't feel
audience,
special.
if you have a response via Twitter, you're free to tweet at me. I'm interested in this as well, about whether there needs to be an explanation, or whether supernatural occurrences and being perhaps unexplained can be still a satisfying conclusion to the show.
And I have a theory right now, that we're not going to get an explanation for the ostensible supernatural phenomena that are presented in the show, that those will never be explained, and that there will not be a supernatural explanation for the Salal men's death. I think that there is going to be a in real life explanation for how the Salal men die, that they died at the hands of man, that it wasn't a freak weather event. Maybe the weather contributed in some way, but that like this was a murder of the Salal men,
Yeah.
and that will be explained, that there will be a killer. The supernatural element, I think, is existing in this show for thematic reasons and not actually to explain any of the mysteries that are happening. So I've been thinking about like, what do these supernatural elements, or these seemingly supernatural elements, have in common? In this episode, we learn about what the spiral means, and the spiral is like, it's not supernatural. It doesn't have to do with some cult or anything. It was actually like a very pragmatic thing that existed to warn hunters of places where the ice was very, very thin.
Right.
And there is this kind of echo of a theme about, you know, white noise and sight, and like, what can you see and what can't you see when it's dark in the night? You can't see things,
Mhm.
what you choose to see, what you don't see, what's underneath, like what's underneath the caves and the ice. So there's like,
We're
in
digging. The researchers are digging
they're
things
digging
up.
for things.
Yeah.
So in Ennis, it's all about who chooses to look for, who chooses to see, like, what are you choosing to see and what are you choosing to be blind to? And
Right.
like, Navarro represents somebody who's always seeking to find the thing, like she wants to see. Liz is somebody who wants to turn a blind eye. Even the one-eyed polar bear, like, does it, like, it's occluded, it
Yeah.
doesn't see. When you
It
look
does
at
and it doesn't see.
it
Right.
doesn't, so it's like,
Yeah. It's
and that's,
both.
I think Liz is kind of at this juncture where there's part of her that wants to know, and there's part of her that knows, don't go looking because it'll just make trouble. When you look at the protesters for the mines, they have the black paint over their mouth as if it's like
Yes.
they don't speak. So
Yeah.
it's like this idea of being silenced, this idea of things being hidden. And if you think about what Navarro is seeing, she's seeing the dead. She's seeing the people who we're not supposed to pay attention to, the people who are forgotten. Annie K is somebody that we're not supposed to think about. She's supposed to be forgotten. It's these like people that the Kate McKintricks of the world are ignoring. They're like, that she does not recognize their personhood. And that's like why the mind can go on poisoning people and everybody turns a blind eye to it. So
Mm.
I think that what we're going to find is that, that it's really a metaphor more than anything else. And maybe we'll stay kind of in this place where there's a question, at least for Navarro, there's a question of like, is this something real or is it her own mental health struggles? We know that this is something that weighs on her. Like, could she suffer the same thing that Julia did? But I think that what it's going to represent in terms of the plot of the show is that there are secrets that are hidden and that people in this town allow things to happen, like allow babies to be poisoned and allow people like Annie Kay to die and go uninvestigated because they choose to turn a blind eye. They choose to drown out the noise, as Rose says, like drown out the noise. But in a quiet place like Ennis, what is it that you hear? It calls to you the voices of the dead, the people who have suffered, the history, the indigenous history. Like, what do the protesters say? They say, we were already here. And like, what does the mind do? It
Mhm.
tries to cover up what was already there. So my theory is that we're not going to get a resolution on whether there are really ghosts, that that's going to have served a thematic purpose, but that when we uncover all of the layers of ice, and when we when we dig deep, what we're going to find is the connection between the mine and Salal, and the fact that there have been these nefarious actors who are actively trying to silence people like Annie, maybe people like the Salal scientists who could have revealed that they have been obscuring the environmental damage that the mine is doing. So that's sort of where I'm at right now going into the finale.
It's very good. I think the thematics of this show are stronger for me. I think they've always been stronger for
Mhm.
me than even sometimes. I think the acting is great. Yeah, the last 2 episodes, I do think some of the writing, not the dialogue. I think it's more
Yeah.
for me, like, I don't know whether Issa Lopez had pitched this to be longer, but I feel like we're moving a lot of pieces in ways that feels like we're rushed. But I think that's okay. I guess the question that I have about that is, I when we were going through on the deep dive and we're like, I'm picking these people, I think we've revealed that there is a connection between the mine and the Salal research station. We know that their funding is linked, and
Mhm.
and why they are linked. Now we know, that it was very, I thought it was actually very clever that, like, oh, they actually do this, like, they report on pollution numbers, and
Mhm.
they lower the amount of pollution that they say that the mines are pumping out. So I thought that it was very smart. I think the piece for me is, I think about, and to relate it back to your point about who is seeing what, I think interestingly, like, the reason why I think, like, Danvers is more the polar bear than Navarro,
Mm.
although I think you could argue Navarro to a degree is the polar bear, is that I think that what Danvers sees and what we see in her relationship specifically with Leah is
Mhm.
she does see the real, and it's not that Navarro or other people don't see the real danger, but she is willing to, like, close that one eye to be like,
Yeah.
uh, you know, um, but the systems that are in place that hurt these people, she sees that danger in a way that Navarro maybe also sees it, but rushes into it anyway. Navarro knows that it's worth it to keep going, and it's in some way almost goes in, sort of in a blind rage. Now at the end of
Mhm.
this episode, you do have, by the end of this episode, Danvers, I think, being a little bit more like, there's a scene where she's like, it's over. We're done. You can't let this sink
Mhm.
you. You have to stop, because what she sees as the potential danger and threat that Navarro will face. By the end of the episode, she's in. She's like, Navarro
Yeah.
says, like, I thought you said it was over. And she's like, I was wrong. Let's go. And they're going together. And I guess what I'm wondering, in terms of, like, trying to figure out potentially how the mystery is revealed to us, is what will they see that is either, like, I do feel like
Yeah.
to some degree it has to be, like, the thing about a mystery show is it has to both be shocking, and also it can't feel like it's completely shocking. And there's so few
Mhm.
people here who could be involved in what's happening. And the other piece that I keep going back to, in terms of why there are specific people who I put on my suspect list, and
Mhm.
there are people who I take off, only because the ending and there being something of of catharsis,
Mhm.
of Danvers potentially finding something that, much like in the Wheeler case, one of them, we still don't really know which one of them did it, other than that they did choose to kill Will Wheeler. What are they going to find there that they are once again being
Yeah.
confronted with? And will, and I think, it's Navarro's story. I think Jodie Foster specifically said this, but
Yes.
is there an element to what keeps happening to Navarro and people like her in this community? If they get to see, if they find something, can Danvers continue to sort of turn a blind eye to
Yeah.
it? And I think in the show, you have to think, you hope that the resolution is no, that they
Yeah.
are able to defeat or overcome whatever they're going to
Mhm.
find in the Night Country. So I don't know what that means in terms of like who could they possibly find, or
Yeah, what are they gonna find in the Night Country? That's a big, so, I mean, what we know, I think, so predictions that we can make that are pretty safe going into the finale episode is, there's this hurricane happening, of course. It's like,
yes,
so the weather's
there is a
bad.
severe weather event
There
coming.
is a severe weather event. Navarro and Danvers are going to go to the ice caves, the underground ice caves that are on the Silver Sky mining property, the Night Country that Otis, I before Otis Heiss is murdered by Hank, he shows Liz where the highest point is, where they can enter. They're going to go there. They got to find Raymond Clark, Grace. We have to finally
I
meet
agree.
Raymond Clark. He's there. We know that whatever is in the Night Country, that this is going to be the site where Annie Kay died. That's what Kate tells Hank, that if Danvers goes in that cave, she'll find that this is where Annie Kay was murdered, and she'll know there's something there that's incriminating. And that's why Silver Sky doesn't want them poking around there. What could this be in the ice caves? We know that it was equipped with a generator, that there's power there. There's something going on that would be directly incriminating to Kate McKendrick and the Silver Sky Mining Company. I can only imagine that this is where we're going to find Raymond Clark finally. What are your theories, Grace, about what could be down there?
So last week, I feel like Reddit boards, and we were on this, was that in the deep dive, was that I do think there's now kind of two people who I put in a, like, if there's one more person to be revealed in
Mhm.
being complicit, it's either Eddie or Rose. Like, it's either Kavik or Rose.
It's not Kavik. It's not. How dare
I
you? When you said that, Grace, I was so mad at you. Not my
I
sweet Kavik.
So I was watching this episode, looking to see, is there a continuation of basically a lack of information, a continuation of omission. I think the big thing for Rose is like, that's not her real name. She has all this money.
Mhm.
It does seem like potentially, well, it didn't seem like it, but her big feast, people speculated whether or not she's being potentially funded. She's Hank's ghost. Um,
Uh-huh. Oh, wow.
yeah. So I would say this week that I think Eddie's actions redeem me. I think
Mhm.
I lower his threat level. He helps solving the case. Rose does a very
He
nice.
had me at SpongeBob
Yeah.
toothbrush.
Yeah. Rose does, I think, and the other piece of this, the difference between Rose and Eddie. Eddie is indigenous. Eddie is
Mhm.
Inupiaq, and I think that I I don't know. It's the best, from the themes of the shit to then be like one of the people. It could be because you could talk yourself into it. A lot of indigenous women who are killed, there are instances
Yeah.
of being killed by other indigenous men because systems have failed them, et cetera, et cetera. But Rose being this outsider, I think, still
Rose needs
lingers
a
with me.
lot more justification for why she's there. Like, right? Like,
I agree.
Eddie
And
is indigenous,
yeah,
he owns a bar,
yeah,
he's sleeping with Navarro. All of this checks
yeah.
out. Like, but
And
Rose is a
yes.
mystery.
And she does this very nice thing, which she cracks the ice to let Julie go. But when I was when they were doing it, I'm like, are they going into the Night Country? And I was like,
Yeah.
well, then there's no way it's Rose. I'm like, oh no, they're not going into the Night Country. She is creating a hole, and she does like pull her back, but I don't think she does enough this episode to make me be like, yep, I would like remove Rose. Rose feels to me, I mean, there's a little bit of like Connolly's
Mhm.
complicitness in this is not, I think, as clear he's running for mayor, so maybe he wants to shut the investigation down. But clearly, Hank has to give that information. Like that information gets to Connolly through Pete's computer. It could just come from Kate to Connolly, and they're linked, right? Or it
Yeah.
could be Hank. And so I feel like Connolly is also like, but I feel like he's fully implicated this in episode that I feel like him turning out to be like super evil next. I mean, I guess
Yeah,
it
it
still
doesn't
could
fit.
be.
It doesn't like fully fit for me. Like
Yeah.
even when Kate and Hank talk in the car, I mean, Kate sort of says, if Connolly is like Connolly's a political animal, like he doesn't have the stomach for what needs to be done, which is basically when she's telling him that Otis Heist needs to be killed. Um, I do feel like you said, Grace, like it wouldn't be an exciting, mysterious reveal to find out that the person that we already know is corrupt and complicit is like actually like the big bad. Like that doesn't fit. So Connolly is clearly bad.
Does it
Hank,
add though if he, for whatever, like he did kill Annie? Like, is that enough to be like, oh, he's that bad? Like he's so bad that he would
yeah, that
kill this woman? Like, is there?
That really wouldn't work for me because
Yeah,
it's like, again, it's just, why would he have been so involved, like doing like the dirty work of this? I mean, maybe that could possibly be the reveal, but like for somebody who's so high profile in this political world, for him to be like the
yeah.
henchman level person, like it just, Hank says in this episode to Liz, like, "Oh, this is below your pay grade." Like, it really feels below, Tim's pay grade, and I just don't think it would have the same kind of, it wouldn't quite have the zip for me to justify the finale reveal. Hank ends up being, like, a little bit more evil than I was expecting and a little bit more directly implicated, but when he says that he didn't kill Annie K, he just moved the body, that does do enough to convince me in this episode. Also, the fact that he's dead and cannot like be discovered. Like, I think we need to have somebody who's still alive and on the board to be found out in this final episode. So I think Hank gets crossed off the possible killer
Yeah,
list.
by Pete. Oh, sorry. Yeah. He got
Yes,
crossed
he
out.
does
Yeah.
get crossed off. That
Yeah.
scene was really something else, Grace.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty tense, and the way Liz is saying, like, "Don't do it," as if she knows exactly. And this is like
Mhm.
her like mentee. So I think that like the feeling of Liz knowing I've trained someone to do exactly what I do, and now I know exactly what he's going to do in this situation. I could feel like the fear in her voice. I feel like I thought it was interesting that we don't actually we Pete had looked into the Wheeler stuff, and
Yeah.
this gets uncovered because he was left-handed, and then they had swapped all the photos. They had like
Mhm.
image reversed them so that everything showed up to be backwards. Um, and when they have this confrontation, and then she says like, "Oh, and you have to know when to stop asking questions." Like,
Yeah.
yeah, that relationship I thought was so interesting. And then she's also like, "Okay, and now you can go stay at my house because you absolutely can't stay with your father," which is how we get him to be
Right.
in the house. But um yeah, this the fear in her voice being like don't do it, Pete, because she knows he's going to do it, because this is not just this is a corrupt man, but also his father, who has not been great to like we
Yeah.
just found out he was like looking on his computer using his son's birthday, as the like
Yeah.
the information to get into his computer. So yeah, that scene is pretty tense. And then too, the like Liz trying to not, he's like, "I'm not keeping you alone, Pete." That feels pretty ominous for Pete as well. That Liz is like,
Yeah.
"You can't be alone." And then the fact that Navarro is like, "You stay here and clean. We're gonna go to the caves."
Yeah, you stay here and clean up the dead body of your father who you just killed because he was going to kill your mentor. I mean, this is like a very intense scene, and like this whole episode is really well acted by Finn Bennett, and I did find the kind of like the tragedy of him discovering that his mentor might have done this corrupt thing, and also confronting that he can't trust his father and that his father is corrupt. I thought that all of that was really emotionally affecting. The piece of writing that I thought was like clumsy in this episode was like connecting the dots that Hank could have looked on Pete's computer and figured out that Navarro and Danvers were implicated in this Wheeler murder. Like, it just like, is there a file on Pete's computer that says like left like flipped images that prove
Yeah.
that Liz killed
Yeah.
this suspect? Like, it just seems like Hank would have had to do all of the independent investigating work that Pete did to get there. It just seemed very too cute that those dots got connected
For
so
me,
neatly.
clumsier is I think that's for me, that one is fine right now. It's more like within the span of the episode, he's like kicked out, he's staying with Hank, and then it's like, no, you can't stay with Hank, you gotta stay with
Mhm.
me. And then he's in the shack in the back, and then he happens to be there
Yeah.
when Hank comes over. So but
Mhm.
that's fine.
Speaking of staying with Hank, I did think it was very lovely that he's, like, waiting outside his dad's house, listening to him play guitar, and then
Yeah,
when he
yeah,
calls his father,
yeah.
he lies and says, "I'm working on my truck." So Pete
Yeah.
does the kindness of saying, "Okay, I'm about 5 minutes away," to not embarrass his dad. I thought that that was, like, a really nice little character detail, and that was an original song by John Hawkes, and
Oh, really?
I thought it was lovely.
Yeah, it was lovely. It's really I think that that's the type of stuff that for as much as I'm criticizing some writing stuff here, that's the stuff that I think is, like, so layered and complex and deep.
Mhm.
This is somebody who, like, they have had a troubled history, obviously. Like, I think you can kinda tell, like, Pete does not want to invite Hank over for Christmas dinner in the last episode, but he, like, kinda can't figure out the excuse to, like, do
Yeah.
he's like, "I'll talk to Kayla, but it's it'll probably be fine." And yeah, but that type of layered, like, he's yeah, he's pretty calm. Why Hank like, you know, any other thing that he I guess because he's
Yeah.
really sad and he doesn't wanna make it seem like
And
he's
he's also,
sad.
like, embarrassed
Yeah,
because his wife
like
left him and thought he
yeah.
was terrible at playing
Oh, yeah,
guitar.
that's
Like,
true, I
it's
forgot
just
about that.
there's so much
Yeah,
so, I mean, it's to me, like, that kind of writing is more important than, like, "You didn't explain how he figured it out from this file." Like, I don't know, like,
yeah,
so I'm willing to
yeah.
forgive a lot. The other clunky piece of writing I thought was, like, the exposition dump between Kate and Hank in the car where we get, like, Kate's, like,
Yeah,
mustache twirly, like,
yeah.
"I'm the baddest person in the show."
I didn't say kill him. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's
Mhm.
just so because we haven't really gotten these scenes where it's like, not basically one of Danvers, Liz,
Mhm.
Pete, like, somebody in sort of this, like, inner circle of people, and so now we get this scene. I guess we've gotten some Hank stuff on his own
Mhm.
because with his wife, but, yeah, yeah, yeah. I I get, like, so I feel like Pete's in a bad I feel like this is bad
Yeah.
news for Pete. Pete's
Mhm.
gonna be going to deliver a body on the ice, and this feels like very bad setup for
To
somebody who
Rose, he's gonna be with Rose. He's
I
gonna bring the body to Rose.
I think Rose potentially, this is where we get the heel turn from, because I think what we find in the cave, if I'm, like, just trying to map out what I think my best guess theory
Mhm.
is, I think we find a lot of information. I think we find Raymond, and I think we find, like, info or, like, there's a generator, like, what could be any just anything that's, like, this is bad and creepy and not
Mm.
good, and Annie found it because it was evidence, and so now then they killed her there, and at the same time, they basically find something that's like and Rose Agnew or whatever, and then also Rose is with Pete and
Yeah.
bad news, so, I
I'm
don't
not
know.
fully sold on Rose being bad, but, like, I do agree that there's, like, very few chips to play with at this point in the series, and, like, she is one of them that I think is
Someone has to
still
be
in
alive.
play.
Who I mean, But Pete just killed his dad,
No,
so
no.
there's, like, who the guy who sold the trailer, the guy who got beat up. There's like,
Yeah.
and these like feel like they're so minor that it's like I don't know what
Yeah.
else to have somebody alive who gives some sort of cathartic moment of like they get arrested or
Yeah.
die. There's
Yeah.
not that many people who that can happen to,
The
you
other
know?
person who's still in the mix, I guess, is Oliver Takak, is, like, somebody else that's still out there as a little bit of a loose thread, like, not a major
Agreed.
enough character to be super satisfying, but we know now that, like, we have kind of admission that Kate was directly involved in Annie's death. She had Hank help move the body and cover it up, and, so we understand that now, and we get all but, like, admission that she's also involved in the Salal death. The other thing we know is that 30 years ago, Otis Heiss was part of an incident that resulted in similar injuries. We
Yes.
get his report in here. There was a cave, men died trapped in ice. We ran out for help, but there was a blizzard. I heard something screaming, howling. The other men started following the sound and tried to go after I tried to go after them, then nothing. I woke up in the hospital and eyes were burned, my ears had gone to shit. So I think that this description from Otis is the closest we've gotten to this point to understanding what could have happened to the Salal men, that it would have been a similar thing. Otis survived this. Raymond Clark also survived this. Raymond Clark found Otis. According to Otis's report, they
Mhm.
didn't know each other prior, not Pete Pryor, but they didn't know each other prior to this incident. But then Clark finds Otis to find out how he survived his injuries.
The pieces of this too, as I keep thinking about, is in terms. Yeah, I guess I maybe don't need an explanation to the question that we started off with, which is like, do you need a supernatural
Mhm,
do you need an explanation for why supernatural things are happening? And I personally don't. I do
mhm.
want to know like how they die, but I don't necessarily need to know that like Navarro is being poisoned by the water to see a ghost. Like I don't
I
need
yeah,
that. If
I
she
don't
just
think
sees ghosts,
I
yeah,
don't like that explanation that the poison
I
water is causing, like, hallucinatory experiences just because, like, I just don't think that, like, I just don't think that, like, the water is, like, giving people cancer and, like,
yes,
killing
yes,
babies. Like,
yes,
that's enough for the water to do.
agree,
Like, it
agreed,
doesn't it
agreed.
doesn't really fit to me that it's also causing this, like, mass psychosis that's, like, selectively only influencing some people, and, of course, I know that, like, not everybody is in the like other some people have access to other water sources, but it still doesn't fit to me that we see like so many different people who are not, you know, having this kind of mass psychosis. Like it doesn't
The
totally fit.
I agree. And the biggest piece for me that doesn't make sense is that like at the beginning of the show, none of the other research station people are like under hallucination, right?
Yeah.
They seem perfectly fine until Raymond Clark shows up and says she's awake, and then something happens. We don't know what happened after that moment that the power gets cut. So I would agree. I don't think it's water poisoning or mind poisoning. I think you're right. Yeah, the bad thing that's happening is that babies are being born stillborn and people have
Yeah.
cancer. Um, but what like what's the link to I, I mean, what seems to be happening to people who we have seen on the show
Mhm.
have hallucinations, other than Otis, I think they've all had very traumatic. There's been a
Yeah.
traumatic death, and I said this last week that like, it's Julia as a mother that that's what
Mhm.
causes Julia to have that moment. Navarro now seemingly has a moment when she's with Rose where she starts to walk towards the ice, and the thing that has just happened to her is trauma,
Mhm.
a traumatic event, and also the case as well. Raymond Clark, whatever his relationship with Annie is, she was killed. He could have done it, but something happened there, so it happened to him. Otis, and then like the other men that Otis is talking about,
Yeah.
and then
And we
all
don't
the
know that
Salal research men.
yeah,
Yeah,
and we don't know that they had a hallucination. We know
we
that they
don't know.
heard something scream and they started following it. And then they had this like very traumatic in a physical traumatic way death. So like I'm trying to think of what so if I don't like let's imagine that
Can I say
no,
one thing before
oh
is that
please.
the piece about like they just go out and walk out, is it
Yeah.
like that's true of like
Yeah.
Julian and Evangeline's mom, but there's so much here to say like they have one of them has a circle on their head, a spiral on their head, like they didn't die from freezing,
Yeah.
right? So something happens to them when I guess we don't know that about the Otis men, right? Like the Otis
Yeah.
crew, we don't know he just wakes up and he says it stays later and I don't know what happened. But these men who like go like, yeah, potentially that crew walked out and they just like die from hypothermia or whatever, as opposed to there's specifically something that happens to them
Yeah.
when this thing happens. It's like they walk out, but it's not like they walk out and die.
It's not like they
Something,
peacefully walk out and die. There's
right,
like, I believe that vet, he was right, that
right.
they were terrified
What if
though. There
that's
was
the big bad? The fake
it was
vet.
the vet. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. So What do the
Navarro is a
people
vet. Just saying. Just
um,
uh,
all right, let's see if I can recover from that. But,
yeah,
what do the people who have been targets of this kind of death potentially have in common? So Annie K and the Salal scientists, we know that Annie and Raymond were together, that she was testing the mines. And we know that Salal is implicated in covering up some of the mines negative, detrimental environmental effects. So, was this something that Raymond, in collaboration with Annie K, was going to make public? Like,
yeah,
was it through her connection to him that she might have discovered something, maybe in these caves, that could have potentially looked bad for the mine, and that made her, because like, yes, she's protesting, but lots of people are protesting. Like, there's a reason that she needed to be murdered. And I'm wondering if it's through her connection with Salal and what she might have learned from that. Then we have Ray Clark, who's potentially also aware of this, whatever Annie had discovered. Um, Maybe the Salal scientists at some point, we see, like, in the immediate moments leading up to their event, that, they don't seem distressed, but do they know something that made them dangerous? Like, is there some reason that they would have needed to be eliminated? I'm also wondering again about, like, this Oliver Tagak, like, he kind of makes himself scarce after Annie dies, so potentially he could have been implicated in this as well. I don't necessarily think that, but maybe the Salal scientists also became a liability because they know about this corruption with the mine. Um, Otis was part of the group that dug these underground caves. And
mhm.
that group of men was ostensibly also targeted. And then after that happens, he kind of goes off the grid and makes himself scarce. So there's something in the cave that potentially Annie had found, that Clark might have known about, and that Otis was directly involved in building, that would have made all of these people a liability, that would have made Otis and his crew a liability 30 years ago, that got targeted. Um, and maybe if not targeted for murder, maybe there's something else like dangerous there that might have happened. But the mine is definitely has to be the driving force
I
connecting all of these events.
I think my theory still stands, whether or not Rose is involved and why she is, whatever. But I think if I best piece all this stuff together, I think probably I really don't know about the people Otis is with. I don't know that. I can't map that at all. But everything else, I think Annie is uncovering stuff that happened. She uncovers it. She is
Mm.
killed either by Anders Lund, maybe Oliver Tagak, and then he chooses to, like, he's like, "This is bad news. I'm leaving." Raymond Clark, I think, is still on the possibility of, like, they make Raymond Clark, like, but I think if that happens, I'm him continuing to be weird. I think that they might
Well,
just why don't they murder him too?
yeah,
So anyway, some combination of, like, the research station men are not all of them killed Annie, but they are complicit in her
right.
murder to keep covering up what the funding that they're getting. To me, Anders Lund is the person who makes the most sense in that, because if you just work there, would you continue to, maybe, but I feel like being the head of it, you're in charge of it,
Mhm,
is like, I have to keep this thing going. It's worth killing her. Raymond then knows that happened. He's like, I need to find Otis because I need to figure out what Annie found. Like, I need to go
mhm,
and find it. He had her phone, right?
mhm.
He finds it, and whether or not he finds it before or after, but he decides that the research station men need to pay. They're all complicit. They all need to die. He's having trauma because he's seeing Annie.
Yeah.
That's who's awake. He's luring them out. They all lure. They come out.
Mhm.
He's drawing a symbol on their head. Like, yeah, it'll be a symbol for you to fall into the, like, yeah, watch out. Like, you won't. You'll know
I
where to
think
fall.
it's a clue. I think that the spiral is a clue. I think that, like, Raymond is, like, trying to point
Wonder if we
people,
could look at
and
who, and I think that that's what Oliver is doing as well.
yes, it's a
Yeah.
clue. Like, this is go and find this spot in
Circle,
the
yeah.
ice
And I
and
wonder who
go.
had it on their head as well, would be interesting.
Yeah, yeah,
But
that
I
would
feel
be.
like those people, they got named, but they're, like, so whatever that
There's,
like
like, Melina,
yeah.
there's, like, Henry David Thoreau no, there's not, but there's somebody like
Yeah.
it's named something
Can
like
yeah. Can though I guess the last thing I just wanna chat about because I feel like we've really dismissed it. I do feel like the rating of this too is like suddenly Navarro is in riot gear at the protest. But I
that.
do think like the riot happening, it does feel like a way to get there's more tension between Danvers and
Leah.
Navarro.
Oh,
There is tension there, but it's also to get like Navarro to be like, they're not like what they're doing is like right and just and look what's happening. And for Leah to actually like espouse it. And then
mhm,
also to then get Leah and Pete in a scene which you could do separately, but they get this nice scene where he delivers a Pepsi even though she likes Mountain Dew. And the scene of like be who you used to be. I thought was I thought it was very sweet that the moment
mhm.
that Kayla fell in love was because he not the games he did well, it was the game where he fell, and then they found out the kid who scored when he fell, his dad had just had a stroke. It was like
Yeah,
very sweet. She's like, she just wants you to be that guy, Pete. Like
mhm.
that's who you need to be. But all that stuff was pretty good. Again, I thought clumsy to get to some of that stuff where like
Mhm.
Navarro is suddenly like in the trooper
But that's what
riot gear,
but
but
that's what the troopers would have done. Like,
yeah,
that's
no,
what
agreed.
that's state trooper work. Yeah, I wanna, like, go back to, kind of pulling at these different threads and how they might be connected. Like, going back to Rose, what kind of academic was Rose? Like, could she have like and why and how does an academic end up in the Arctic Circle? Could she have been a climatologist? Could she have been
She into
a geologist?
spirituality,
Could she have been but, like, I mean,
religion.
is there something that she like, could she know something by
Yeah,
virtue of
right.
her academic expertise that has something to do with what's going on at Salal? Like, could there be this other
I
connection?
I could see her be like, some connection to the NGO that, like, she's there as, like, boots to make sure that, like, everything is in like, this stuff keeps happening. Like, I guess I get it does for sure feel like a stretch. Um,
Yeah.
I just feel like her presence, it in a show that otherwise is trying to represent indigenous culture and Inupiaq people. The story of this woman who has this boyfriend who died, and it, you know, they're both white. They're both they
Mhm.
did that. They're there for me to a degree. Other than that, she's like unnamed, and she's
Mhm.
been on other HBO stuff, I think,
Fiona
right too.
Shaw, yeah.
Like, but she's not such a big name. But if Issa Lopez just like wanted to work with her, like, and then they wrote this, like, if we find out that like Rose is just there as like mentor to Navarro, like spiritual mentor, whereas like Danvers is like, um, work mentor or lover or whatever. We still have gotten no
Mhm. Mhm.
word on that. Then that's fine. I think that is what it is. I've really loved the Rose stuff that we've gotten so
Yeah.
far. It just does feel like there is like something you could. The fact that she has a fake name, she's throwing this elaborate feast for nobody. It's like, is there a
I mean,
flashback
that's
where like
badass. I think that's awesome of her, but I do think the fact that, like, the show chooses to give her a fake name and a past that would make her, like, highly educated and distinguished in a way where I'm not convinced. I don't think she's, like, the muscle of the NGO.
I
Like, that
don't
would
think
be
so either.
ridiculous to, like, say, like, "We're gonna send this 65-year-old woman there to make sure that everything's okay." But
Isn't she also Travis is also Russ's dad, so she has a connection to like the
yes.
cult stuff from I don't know.
Yeah, well, I
Um,
will say that, like, I did hear that
oh, I've
apparently,
heard this too. Yeah.
um,
No, no.
what's the
Nicholas
creator's
Pizzolatto, I think, or
Nicholas
something like that.
Pizzolatto is, like, saying, like, that he's annoyed that Issa Lopez chose to make these connections, that this is, like, not part of his canon of what happens in True Detective season 1. So I think that these links are more, like, nice Easter eggs for
I
fans
I agree.
than it's like we're supposed to actually
I
go
think
back.
we also got the explanation of. I think you can map out that
No,
like
yeah.
Annie. The only piece that's annoying is that Navarro. I guess Navarro moved away and she's been away, so why would she know? And would anybody else need like the fact that they're like, oh, it's a thing that every kid knows. to your nose is the
Mhm.
only piece, like, but whatever, it's
Well,
fine.
Tavik didn't know either, like, which is also,
Okay.
about
Yeah.
the spiral. So, like,
Yeah. So
um
Annie dreams it seemingly, right? Which would make sense that you would dream about this thing that like other people
right.
in your community, like she could have seen it before, right? She could have been on the ice and
Mhm.
seen it. She dreams it. Once like gets it tattooed, she doesn't see it. Raymond sees it. It's obviously a piece that Annie would have followed to get into the
Mhm.
cave. So then Raymond is like, if he's following what happened to Annie, he
Mhm.
obviously knows about it, or he's super complicit and she was following his, the fact that he had the, et cetera, et
Mhm.
cetera. It makes sense that the symbol is, like, out there,
It's
and I don't think it's
permeated her
connected,
consciousness in some way,
and
yeah.
so I don't think it's connected to, like, the season 1 cult, for
No,
example. Yeah,
no.
yeah. Well, is there anything else? Anything else you
Oh my
wanna chat
goodness.
through? I feel like there's a lot, and I feel like we're doing a lot of speculating, but
We're doing a
I
lot that it's our last
yeah,
chance to
I
well,
know.
my last chance. You have plenty of chances to
Well,
speculate.
I did like the episode. Again, I think that, like, I wanna give credit to, like, Issa a bit that, like, yeah, she only got 6 episodes, and so I feel like sometimes the pieces are trying to be moved in a way, but mostly, and I think your, like, point to start with, like, the themes and what
Yeah.
people are seeing, and I think in all of these theories, I think it has to be, like, I feel like that hopefully will be resonant in the last episode too, of, like, what are they going to go and see and find that ultimately, I think, like, interesting. I was thinking about, like, that they can't, that, like, specifically Liz can't look away from anymore. Although to a degree, like, isn't that kind of what happened with Wheeler? That, like,
Mm,
they just, she could, like, and again, we don't know exactly which one of them did this, but the fact that they
mhm,
could not, like, look away from that, from Wheeler even being allowed to live anymore because of how much
mhm,
harm he had done, is the way in which, like, that has happened to them before, like, those 2 specifically have happened to them before. Um, but I loved your analysis of the theme, and I think I'm trying to, like, be like, that's, I think it's so spot on that I'm now trying to figure out, like, okay, what does it mean for, like, the piece of information that will be revealed
yeah,
in the end?
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, with these kinds of shows, a huge part of their success relies in, how do they handle the mystery, right? Do they give us, like you said, enough that it's satisfying and it makes sense, but it also surprises us. So, we can't judge that yet. But I will say, like, it doesn't bother me that this is a 6 episode series. I think it's been like really jam packed in terms of it, like exciting action, great characters, like brilliant acting performances. And again, like I think that Issa Lopez has been very ambitious and largely successful in the ambitions of weaving together these really important themes that have to do with colonization and climate change and indigenous cultures, like, and our exploitation of people and the land and the human cost of that and the natural cost of that, and to put that in a detective show that is also a murder mystery is, I think, something that is a pretty tall order. And I think that she's done a really lovely job with it. And I love seeing this content tackled in media. Like, there's a lot of detective mystery shows out there. um this show is drawn comparisons with Mayor of Easttown, which I thought was pretty good. But like, I
Mhm.
I I don't personally have an appetite for just another murder mystery. So the fact that I think that this show has done so much more and done it with this like incredible female driven cast and tackled these kind of broader sociocultural themes is very impressive.
I totally agree. I mean, any of my critiques are, like, small. I feel like small compared to, I think,
Mhm.
the overwhelming success, I think,
Yeah.
of this show in terms of, like, my enjoyment of the show, the quality of the show,
Mhm.
what it's talking about,
Yeah.
etc. So,
Yeah. We talked
um,
about this, Grace, before we started recording today, and, like, I just watched Wonka with my kids,
yes,
and,
yes,
my son really enjoyed listening to your post-show recaps theater,
uh-huh,
episode about the Mario movie. So I told him that there was one about Wonka, and he wanted to listen to it, and we were listening to it together. It was really sweet, and then it got to the point where you had said all the things you liked about it, and
yeah,
you were about to pivot to more critique, and he said, I don't want to hear anymore because I just like the movie. I know that they're going to say what's bad about it now, and I don't care. And I do feel
mm,
like that's a good, refreshing message sometimes, is
yeah,
like, as podcasters and critics and like viewers, that I love, examining something and finding the seams and talking about that. But like sometimes it's a helpful reminder to step back and like see the show for what it is and what is successful about it. And that's not to say that like I think that there's a lot of things we have to ignore to enjoy True Detective Night Country. I think it's incredibly well done, but we don't have to like pick apart every single thing
Yeah.
about this show.
And so what? Better that it got made than that it didn't get made, you know? So
Yeah.
I said this to you before, but I think a lesson that should live more like your son's world than the world I currently live in sometimes. And also maybe you need to edit the pod, like format pods so it's like all the if you just want to hear the nice
Yeah.
good stuff up front, and then we're really mean in the back back half of the pod. Yeah.
A little something for everyone.
That's right. Yeah. All right. Well, this is so fun. Only one more episode. I mean, I'm kind of sad about that we only have
I
one more.
know. I know this has
Yeah.
been a really great show to talk about. I'm really excited about the finale and getting to cover it with you, Grace, and getting to do it with live on
Yes.
YouTube with all of the audience viewing and giving their feedback. I'm serious. I really want people to watch us live and to give us things to talk about because I think it'll be really fun and looking forward to that. In the meantime, Grace, what
Mhm.
are you up to? Where can people keep up with you?
So Jess and I are doing full spoiler recaps. Last week, we talked about a show that I am trying to remember, and that's fine. Scavenger's Reign, I think, was last week, and this week we're doing Boy Swallows Universe, which is an Australian show on Netflix. It's pretty good. It's a lot darker than I thought it was going to be, which actually I am delighted by. I think it's very good. And then on post show recaps, theater, Aaron and I talked about Argyle this week, which is a very interesting movie. And yeah, and then I'll have more True Detective coverage this week. Make sure to subscribe, postshowrecaps.com/True Detective. What about you, Dr. Amanda?
Awesome. I am covering 6 Feet Under with Ariel, having a really great time through season 2 of that show, which is really firing on all cylinders, in my opinion. So you can always keep up with everything I'm doing by following me on Twitter, where I am at Dr. Amanda R.
All right, we'll be back next week. We'll be live on YouTube, youtube.com/post recaps. Come and join us. If you want a good bit, you can sign in as a ghost and then just point. If you want to write just pointing, if you want that,
Mhm.
everybody's welcome from all world, spiritual, and the material plane. So,
Yes.
yeah, join us for that. We will be back then. Until then, we will be detectiving truly.